where plans for D-Day would be set in motion. Wow. Very busy.
Awesome.
All right, we love it. Thanks to everybody on the couch. Good stuff. Go
Harris
get your
doesn't
book.
like World War II, or is
You know what? She stole the young readers' copies and ran away. That's what happened. But I'm going to go catch after her and get them back. Thank you, Brett Baer. We are back here on the couch at noon Eastern tomorrow. Now, here's Harris.
I love it when they gossip about me. We'll start with this news. Democrats are calling a key Ukraine witness to Capitol Hill as the president is pushing back on their impeachment inquiry. We're outnumbered overtime now. I'm Harris Faulkner. Acting ambassador to the Ukraine, William Taylor, complying with Democrats' subpoena to testify before 3 House panels after Fox News was told the State Department tried to prevent Taylor from appearing today. Democrats are expected to press him on text messages he sent to the EU ambassador, where he raised concerns about a possible quid pro quo over military aid with Ukraine. A short time ago, one Democratic lawmaker who was just walking out of Taylor's deposition, remember it's behind closed doors, so we shouldn't learn too much, but this Democrat suggested today's closed door testimony was a game changer.
All I have to say is that in my 10 short months in Congress, it's not even noon, right? And this is my most disturbing day in Congress so far. Very troubling.
Characterizing behind closed doors. However, President Trump says Democrats' witnesses are actually helping his case.
I don't know most of these people. If I do, I met them quickly, or I know them very little. But ambassadors and some others, I don't even know. Most of them I never even heard of their names, okay? And they're bringing them in, and they're actually turning out to be better witnesses by far for us.
Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live for us on Capitol Hill. Catherine?
Thank you, Harrison. Good afternoon. Bill Taylor matters because he raised red flags over the administration's decision to suspend military aid to Ukraine, and he questioned whether it was tied to investigations into the Bidens and alleged interference in the 2016 election by the Ukrainians. What we know from today is that he arrived on Capitol Hill. He's been behind closed doors for several hours. Some of his backstory is that he is a top U.S. diplomat currently in Ukraine. He's a West Point graduate, a Vietnam veteran, and he's had multiple overseas postings to the Middle East, NATO, and Afghanistan. The reason he's in the spotlight is because of these text messages in September that he exchanged with the administration's point man for the European Union, Gordon Sondland. Taylor wrote, "As I said on the phone, I think it's crazy to withhold security assistance for help with a political campaign." And Sondland responded, "Bill, I believe you are incorrect about President Trump's intentions. The president has been crystal clear, no quid pro quos of any kind," adding, "The president is trying to evaluate whether Ukraine is truly going to adopt the transparency and reforms that President Zelensky promised during his campaign. I suggest we stop the back and forth by text." On Twitter this morning, the president wrote, quote, "If a Democrat becomes president and the Republicans win the House, even by a tiny margin, they can impeach the president without due process or fairness or any legal rights. All Republicans must remember what they are witnessing here, a lynching, but we will win." That reference to a lynching provoked a strong response from Republicans and Democrats.
For the president to compare the lawful proceeding, holding him accountable in the House, to that kind of absolute disgrace based on racial hatred is a disservice to those communities that have endured that kind of tragedy.
Earlier this morning, we heard from a senior Republican who sits on the Oversight Committee, and he alleged that Democrats are taking even more steps to further restrict their access to the transcripts and other records.
Just when you thought the process couldn't get any more unfair, we found out last night that Democrats will now not even allow Republicans to have a copy of the respective transcripts from each of the witnesses we've interviewed thus far. And if, in fact, so no copy, we can't make copies, we don't get a copy, which I've never seen happen before. And if we want to look at the transcript, we got to go in, and there's got to be a Democrat staffer in there watching members of Congress actually read a transcript.
Republicans continue to ask questions about the whistleblower and the original complaint. As you recall, based on our reporting, when they did their disclosure form, they checked the box that said they had contacted their direct report, if you will, or their agency, but had no congressional contact, which we now know is not the case. And Republicans argue that the only people who can answer that question are members of the committee who are running this investigation, Harris.
Catherine, thank you very much. I want to bring
You're
in
welcome.
now former acting attorney general under President Trump, Matt Whitaker. Good to see you today. Let's talk about what's going on. Now, we know that this is behind closed doors with Ambassador William Taylor. However, we saw a Democrat from Michigan giving his characterization that his testimony by Taylor was the most disturbing day in his time on Capitol Hill. Could this hurt the president?
Well, I think in this situation where we have a member of Congress coming out and characterizing testimony but not saying what the testimony is, and the American people have no visibility, and it sounds like member of Congress can't even get a transcript. I think this whole process is concerning and against really what everything that this country stands for. You know, accountability, transparency, those types of basic tenets, due process. You know, the Democrats and Speaker Pelosi say that this is a constitutional proceeding, and to me it looks like just the opposite. It looks like a unprecedented attack by the Democrats on a Republican president.
You know what's interesting to me, Matt, when you talk about, and my question was, could anything that William Taylor would say behind closed doors hurt the president? We don't know. But what you just said was that Republicans don't know either because they can't get the transcripts?
Yeah, correct. I mean, obviously, in the deposition, there are Republican members of Congress that are part of the Intel Committee, but the rank and file Republicans who are going to have to vote on this ultimately, if there's even a official impeachment inquiry, are going to have very little information. And this is one of the things that I think this conspiracy between the Democrats on the Intelligence Committee and the Washington Post and the New York Times to sort of tell this story without the American people actually having the evidence is very concerning. And again, when the shoe's on the other foot, we should expect this to be the future of our country if this is really the way Democrats want to proceed.
Yeah, you saw the president tweeting about that today, and actually the tweet, the word lynching getting more response or heat, if you will, than anything in the tweet in terms of him being sought after inappropriately as he's talking about Democrats. What do you say about that?
Well, what I say is the tweet says that Democrats should rue the day that the shoe is on the other foot, like I just said. And what's going to happen is without an official impeachment inquiry vote, and they haven't done that yet, we are going to now see sort of impeachment inquiries by edict of the Speaker of the House, whoever's in power, against the other party's president. And this is a concerning moment in American history, and I sure hope the House can get this back on track and actually take that vote to launch an official impeachment inquiry.
One more question on it. Do you think that that gets lost in translation? And you can see it at the bottom of our screen by a word that the president uses in a tweet.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. Obviously, the history of our country as it relates to lynching, especially post-Civil War, is a very dark and troubling time in America's history. And I just can't, you know, sort of characterize what the House is doing in a purely partisan attack in that way.
All right, we'll move on. Meanwhile, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is warning intelligence officials in a letter that President Trump may reveal the identity of the whistleblower while demanding to know how they plan to protect that person. So, Matt Whitaker, talk to me about whistleblowers' protection and going forward if that becomes public, this person's name.
Right. So whistleblowers are protected by statute from retaliation for their job. So this whistleblower obviously can't be demoted or fired or otherwise penalized for that. But there is no promise of anonymity. And by keeping this whistleblower anonymous, I think it really takes away a lot of the transparency that we would expect, because typically you have a witness and you know what baggage that witness carries, whether it's partisan baggage, whether it's work performance or criminal baggage. And in this case, we have a very generic whistleblower who doesn't have to account for who they are. And I think that's concerning, and there's no promise of anonymity, and I don't think there should be in this case.
All right, we will continue to follow it.